let's talk about this election, right? And the majority, not all, but the majority of people that listen to our program are Black people, right?
Right.
And the majority of Black people are going to vote Democrat historically, yeah. And they probably will vote Democrat this year, right? And they are very concerned. A lot of people are very concerned with the Republican Party's extremely conservative agenda. It seems like Project 2025 has become a lightning rod on social media. The Supreme Court has taken an extremely conservative turn, and we've seen some interesting decisions as far as, even with the private equity firm owned by Black women, and they were the Freedom Fund. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that case or not, but that was something that we covered on this channel. We heard that Donald Trump talking about immunity for police officers across the board. I want to let you speak on the concerns that Black people have for the Republican Party.
Well, I can't speak to all the concerns that anybody has about any party. I can speak to some of the issues and the challenges that I have tried to address as just a person who understands the plight of the poor, having been one. Not all Black people are poor, so I can't pretend to speak for all Black people or speak to the issues of all Black people. I can, however, speak to the issues of those of us who've had a similar experience or a similar experience growing up as I have. In 2016, 2017, I gave 3 speeches on police reform and the necessity of it. It happened right after the Walter Scott shooting in 2015, where African-American guy in North Charleston, South Carolina, about 2 or 3 streets away from where I used to play and run around, was shot in the back by a law enforcement officer who said that the situation was completely different than actually turned out when we saw the video. So I went to work on trying to provide $100 million of additional funding for body-worn cameras so that we would have the actual picture of what happened. I said then, and I'll say it again, that a picture is worth 1,000 words, but a video is worth 1,000 pictures. And so while Walter Scott and I were not related, that situation has played out too often around the country. And I wanted to have an opportunity to address that. And the most effective way to address that, frankly, is through providing more body-worn cameras from my perspective. Second thing I did was give a speech in the line of 3 speeches about the fact that I had, as an African-American man, I've been talking about this since my county council days 20 plus years ago, about DWB. We all know what that means, driving while Black. And I had been stopped 22 times in 20 years, 4 times as a senator, just driving while Black, doing nothing wrong. Simply, I have sped before, but I wasn't speeding these times. And so wanted to lay out that the concerns and the issues that you hear raised around the country are real issues that we needed to address. I went around my state with a Congress member and met with African-American leaders and law enforcement leaders to bring the communities together so that we could start solving the problems. I gave a 3rd speech about the necessity of police reform and worked on it for 5 years, getting about 85% of the way there before folks no longer wanted to finish the negotiations. As it relates to qualified immunity, which is an issue that you brought up, I'm a person who believes that if you understand the difference between qualified immunity and law enforcement officers that break the law, that we saw the law enforcement officer who shot the African-American female in the face arrested for murder. What you'll see is that the transformation that we've seen in the last 10 years has been strong, powerful, and positive, not complete. And so working on the issue of more justice in our justice system, I've oftentimes spoken those speeches about having the thumb or a foot, or frankly, a whole body on the scales of justice, and how our community has consistently had paid the price for that inconsistent application of the justice system, and the necessity of improving it is something that I've worked on for the last 7 years, maybe 9 years at this point. And the same thing after the Mother Emanuel church shooting. And so I look at those issues, and I think sometimes if you're only watching a single channel, if you're only getting your information from one source, you don't actually see the evidence that there is a bipartisan coalition working on behalf of the issues that confront, impact negatively our community. I'd say that second point I'd say is that when you look at the economic realities that we face, Republicans have done a really good job. Frankly, I wrote the personal side of the 2017 tax code, and one of the things I focused on specifically within that tax code was the importance of making sure that monthers like mine, who work 16 hours a day, 5 days a week, just to keep the lights on most of the time, put food on the table most of the time, would have more for resources to spend on her family. We reduced in 2017 the single mom's taxes by 70% on the federal level. We increased the child tax credit by 100% from $1,000 to $2,000 at that time. We kept in place all the requirements necessary for work, because I think work is a very good thing and necessary for long-term success and viability in this society. I'd also add to that, we took a look at, there were really no cuts to any of the support programs, but we did find that by cutting taxes, the average family received over $4,400 of their own money back in lower taxes and more opportunities. That combination led to the lowest unemployment rate in the history of the country for African Americans, the first time under 6%. And so I think we could tell a very strong story about how the Republican Party has done a very good job of addressing some of the challenges that are being faced by the African American community and minorities throughout the country. I don't think that the oxygen to hear that conversation has been available more often than not. I love having a debate about the underlying issues that we face as a country, not red or blue, but just typically green or justice. And when we have that kind of debate, that's a debate I like to show up for, because we have something, at least I have something I can tell. And the more we hear the whole story, as opposed to the clips that have been snipped to fit into the narrative, the caricature that we make of elected officials, the better off we will be on making decisions about our future and how we get there with more resources, more justice, and more opportunity.
Yeah, those are some of the issues, and I wonder. I mean, they are American issues, but at times it may not feel right. You said like some of these things are done bipartisan, but it may not feel that way based on narrative. I wonder, as a Black Republican senator, I believe the only one, do you feel a responsibility or a weight to make sure that these issues are sought by the party, or is this something that is naturally, as American politicians, this is something that everybody universally feels, even in terms of DEI, which is one of the things that we didn't just bring up, but another thing that we're seeing repealed, and again affecting us directly. Your thoughts around that and the responsibility that you play in it?
Yeah, I think most people misunderstand who I am and what I represent in public office just because they haven't had a lot of time paying attention to me on a non-biased channel. You guys are giving me an opportunity to speak. You can debate the issues, and I love that, because that's something that I yearn for, I thirst for, the opportunity to have a serious discussion about what actually leads to progress in our country. I've said this 1,000 times, I believe it's true. Very consistent with Jeremiah 1:5, that Jeremiah was made to be a prophet before he was ever in his mother's womb, that he actually had a destiny and a future that he was hardwired for, not predestined, but certainly he was hardwired for. And in the same vein, I see myself in that same vein, in that God made me Black on purpose. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a characteristic he just threw on with more melanin in my skin. He made me Black on purpose. And I think if we understand that, then we understand that every single characteristic that the Lord gives us should be used to his glory, including the color of our skin. And we should not see that as an exclusive opportunity, but we should see that as an inclusive opportunity to make the whole better because of every single component part of that chain. And so I do feel that I have been given the responsibility by the Lord to represent all of who I am, and to do it not in an exclusive environment, but to make it a part of the whole. And that's what I try to do. I've been the voice within the party I've had that experience. I've lived that life. I've had the chance to understand the pain and the challenges that so many of us have had to endure. And if you haven't been that person, you don't fully understand those challenges. And I can't pretend to understand the challenges of other people either, but I do understand what I've had to go through to get to where I am. And so opening that door of understanding has been a part of the blessing that God has bestowed upon me. Now, there's only 3 Democrats who are African Americans as well in the Senate. So the one on my side, 3 on the other side, and they just got 3 about 6 months ago, the third person. And so the challenge of progress is one that we should all bear the responsibility of. But I will say this, and this may not be the most popular thing I've said. I've oftentimes said that for 190 years, African Americans have been carved out of the free market system known as the American Free Enterprise System. So it means only for the last 60 years have we had access to it, and not always full access to it. So understanding that means that as a small business owner, my life economically was changed. My mother's life, my family's future was changed when I started my own business and became fairly successful at that. I want to major in finance, minor in race, because too often, too many of our elected officials have had only one responsibility, and that's to look towards the government as the only solution to deal with the issues being confronted by our community. That as a single-minded approach is one that only leads to failure long term. We should understand the important role that government plays in solving some of the problems. But if we don't, since we've had an opportunity to be carved into free markets and capitalism, if we don't figure out this free market system and figure it out that there are only three ways to create wealth in this country: real estate, equity position in the marketplace, starting a small business and becoming successful. If we don't understand that, then we won't see the tide change, because today's tides will be changed not first by government, but first by resources.